12:53 p.m. This is the beginning of Media Unit 3.
All right, Mr. Chason, are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. Are you ready?
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay. So, I'm going to bring your attention back to your report to the board.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And in that, I believe it's on the third page, there is a break indicated by a bunch of stars. Do you see that?
Oh, yes.
Why did you put that break in there?
That was where I had basically delivered what I had in the holiday matter, and that at that point the board was going to discuss or do whatever the action was going to be. And then subsequent to that, I would then begin what followed.
Perfect. I appreciate that. Okay, so going up from those stars there's a bunch of bullet points. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And the second full one on that page says through an accountability lens.
Yes.
I have had a number of whistleblower concerns come my way over the years. This is the first I've seen where the concerns brought to this office had already been investigated and codified by the board's legal counsel and communicated to the administration a year prior. Is that accurate reading?
Yes, it is.
What did you mean by that?
So, we had received concerns about the toxic environment under Holiday, and subsequent to my review, the discovery of the codified findings of the external investigator from a year prior.
Okay, and that's to say that you found, as we've discussed earlier, significant overlap between the concerns in the Peterson report and the concerns raised by you. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. And what did you mean through an accountability lens?
Oh, I was just framing for the board from what perspective I was offering the commentary.
Okay, and so that's sort of, for lack of a better word, trying to put this at least in one of the two lanes that we've discussed?
That wasn't my specific intent here, but trying to draw attention to, in this instance, the lack of accountability that had happened.
Okay, and is this accountability both for Mr. Holliday and for MPS, or for one of those, or something else?
I was only referring to the Holiday matter here.
Okay, now I understand. So really you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the issue here is that the board didn't take any action the first time with Dr. Holliday, and now these similar concerns have been raised again?
My concern here was that the administration, Dr. Posley, had been made aware of the Pedersen report about a year prior, and to my observation, there hadn't been any accountability.
Okay. So, and again, accountability to Dr. Holliday?
Correct.
Okay. But possibly retaliation? Like, for example, Deb Bowling said that she was being retaliated against, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And Dr. Keither also made those allegations?
That's correct.
Okay. Then it goes on to say, through a risk and liability perspective, there are right now multiple open complaints in the employee rights area regarding Dr. Holliday. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
Okay. First, can you explain to me the distinction between a risk and liability perspective as opposed to accountability lens?
What I was my intent there was to let the board know that the complaints that had been received internally, because the board is the only legal body that has an actual existence and can be sued, that each of those from that perspective was a risk and a liability as such.
Okay, and so is it fair to say that because the board hadn't taken any action between the Peterson report and the complaints that you're raising now, there was a risk that the board would be held liable?
My intent here was that since the administration had not taken any action,
Okay.
the board now, as the only body that truly exists as an entity, now assumes that risk and liability.
Okay.
That's what I was intending to communicate.
Okay. So the inaction here, is that in your mind only the administration or something else?
The administration at this point.
Okay. And not necessarily the board?
Correct.
Okay. But the board didn't take any action subsequent to this report, correct?
Dr. Holliday ended up in a different position subsequent to this, I don't know if the board directed that or not.
Okay. Do you have any basis to believe that that position change was related to Dr. Keither's complaints?
I presume it.
Okay. So does that mean a guess or something else?
Dr. Holliday only had the move subsequent to my raising the concern to the board.
Okay. And explain to me the move.
His movement from what was at that time an acting or interim chief of academics officer to whatever the subsequent role was.
Okay. And to be clear, you understood that Dr. Keither had already gone to Calvin Furman in October of 2020, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And what result, if any, occurred after that meeting with Dr. Furman? Or Mr. Furman?
Drip Foundation.
I'm unfamiliar with any result.
Okay. By Mr. Furman or anybody else?
Yeah, not that I'm aware of.
Okay. But it's also fair to say that soon thereafter, Dr. Keither was involuntarily transferred, correct?
That is, yes.
Okay. And you believe that Dr. Keither was involuntarily transferred partially because, or at least in part because she made complaints, correct?
I do.
Okay. Why do you form that belief?
She had, at the time that she contacted me, and at the time that she was moved, to open EEOC complaints within HR, one against Holiday and one against Saffold.
Okay. And so you believe those, her involuntary transfer was a result of her filing those internal complaints?
I believe that those were contributing factors.
Okay. What else, if anything, do you believe contributed to her involuntary transfer?
My read was that Dr. Keither was sort of the loudest advocate for everyone who was in a bad situation.
Okay. So in other words, she was speaking up for her coworkers, is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. And you understood that also because you've seen documents of her speaking up for coworkers, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, and she also told you she was speaking up for coworkers?
Yes, very likely, and or through the transmission of what was shared with me.
Okay. But you had knowledge at that time?
Yes.
Okay. Let's see here. Okay. Okay. I'm going to talk about curriculum and instruction and literacy curriculum, okay?
Okay.
Did you understand that that was an issue with Dr. Keither and Dr. Saffold prior to Dr. Keither's involuntary transfer?
Check the form of question. Vague.
I'll join the objection.
I don't recall if I knew that prior to her involuntary transfer.
Okay. Did you ever know that?
Same objection.
Subsequent to.
Okay. How did you learn that?
She shared that with me.
Okay. And so what you had said before was that Dr. Keither had made internal complaints.
Yes.
And those complaints were not directed at your office, meaning not whistleblower complaints. Is that right?
Correct. She had submitted I believe, bullying and harassing complaints to HR.
Okay, and HR, who do you mean by that?
The employee ERAD.
Okay, employee rights,
Yes.
as opposed to employee relations.
Yes.
Okay, and that's employee rights is Yashika Spears. Is that
I believe she's employed in that division/department.
okay? And that's also the division/department that can only recommend counseling as a remedial action. Is that right?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, is that because you don't know the different which one can do that, or for some other reason?
I don't know the boundaries or the limitations of their authority.
Okay. Have you ever investigated what the bounds and limitations of their authority are?
I don't recall.
Have you ever stopped investigating a whistleblower complaint because the ERAD was also investigating?
I have not pursued one because one was already open in that area prior to anyone reaching out to me.
Okay. And at that time, what was your basis for, or did you believe that an ERAD investigation would be sufficient to resolving the whistleblower's complaint?
Objective form of question. Vague.
Can you just repeat the question?
And at that time, what were your basis, or did you believe that an EARD investigation would be sufficient to resolving the whistleblower complaints? What ways? What was your basis? Sorry.
Could you?
At that time, what was your basis for, or did you believe that an EARD investigation would be sufficient to resolving the whistleblower's complaints?
Can you restate that question?
Absolutely.
I'm so sorry.
Not at all, because I want you to be clear and I want the answer to be clear. So, you made a decision with Dr. Garcia Hoven's case to not investigate that further because you were aware of an investigation with ERAD, correct?
Correct. That was open and preceded by knowledge of it. Yes.
Okay. At that time, did you believe that the ERAD investigation would, or why, scratch that, why did you not investigate in favor of the open investigation at that time?
My judgment at the time was that there was already an open and an active investigation, and that would adequately resolve the matter.
Great. Why did you believe at that time that that investigation would adequately resolve the matter?
I, in the past, had the sense that was the appropriate avenue in which that concern should be raised, and that appropriate outcomes have taken place.
Okay. And what's your knowledge of what the outcomes are?
With I think it's just experiencing the organization that when those matters have been brought forward to the area and they investigated and they concluded that certain things had occurred, and that the appropriate remedy or corrective actions had taken place.
Okay. What is your knowledge of what the appropriate and or corrective actions were in those cases?
Again, objective form, vague, ambiguous.
Yeah, I would be familiar with them coaching and or mentoring staff to correct the behaviors that were in play.
Mm-hmm.
I don't recall any other specific measures.
Okay. So it's fair to say that at this time you were aware that ERAD had only imposed coaching as a remedy for allegations of discrimination,
I'm
correct?
gonna object Ms. Daly's prior testimony.
Very vague. Very ambiguous.
If I knew differently then, I don't recall.
Okay. So why did you feel for Garcia Hoven that the known remedies to you of coaching would be sufficient to resolve his complaint?
Yeah, that was my presumption.
Okay. And going to your office, what remedies can you order if you find that the whistleblower had been retaliated against? What remedies can you order?
Yeah, I can bring it to the attention of whomever I think can actually correct the problem.
Okay, but in this case, you brought it to the attention of the board, and they took no adequate steps to correct the problem, based on your knowledge, correct?
In the
Keither matter, for example.
correct.
Okay, is there any other matters that you took to the board? Well, what about the Posley matter? Did they take any action with regard to that?
Object the foundation.
With the exception of the demotion of Marla Bernard to another position, I'm unfamiliar with any other action that they took.
Okay. So it's fair to say that your office cannot actually remedy the situation. You can only recommend or give your findings to the board, who ultimately is the ones who makes the decision.
Yeah, or if it's indicated, I could bring it to the attention of an executive officer to correct it. But in these instances, they're brought to the board.
Okay, and that's because Posley is involved?
Object the form.
That was my judgment at the time.
Okay. And so, based on that judgment, is it fair to say that it would have been counterproductive to bring an allegation against Dr. Posley to Dr. Posley?
Object the form, incomplete hypothetical.
You asked if it was fair?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And was that why you made that decision?
Yes, I thought that the involvement of the individuals in question required this to be brought to the attention of the board.
Okay. So when you told the individual in question, Dr. Posley, about your findings, then you had an interaction with Dr. Posley and Mr. Furman, correct?
They were only made aware through that executive session.
Great. So we'll take that into account. Okay. So what response, if any, did they have at that point?
So the rebuttal that Dr. Posley offered was that he said that Dr. Keither was, and I'm paraphrasing, but the general tone or tenor would have been that she was disruptive in the area, and I recall him saying like that she had swore in a meeting. That's what I recall.
Okay. So Posley told you that he had, and you're clear at this time that Dr. Posley had personally ordered the involuntary transfer of Dr. Keither, correct?
Object the form, it states by testimony.
That was my understanding based on my investigation and the statements from Dr. Cotton and Calvin Furman.
Right, because Calvin Furman told you and Dr. Cotton told you that Dr. Posley made that decision. Correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So, when you were in your discussions with the decision maker was only able to identify that Dr. Keither was disruptive and that she swore in a meeting as the basis for involuntarily transferring her, correct?
I'm gonna object the form of question.
If he said more, I don't recall it.
Okay. What else took place during this interaction between you and Dr. Posley?
So to be sure, this was the conversation that took place in the executive session,
Mm-hmm.
in front of the board, and I can't recall. I don't know if I'm conflating discussion that took place on the holiday matter specifically with conversation that took place specifically with the Keither matter. I'm sorry. I'm having a hard time separating those two.
What's the distinction?
So subsequent to my delivery of this first part before here, there was conversation about it, and then once I was done, I led with this second.
Great. So let's focus on the conversation about the holiday matter first.
Okay.
So there was back and forth between you and Mr. Posley or anybody else?
No board members had raised some questions and asked things.
What were the questions?
I remember one of the questions was, is there some aspect of Dr. Holliday's leadership that offsets what are apparent, I'm paraphrasing, but deficiencies and concerns that are being raised? I remember that question being raised.
Was there an answer to that question?
I don't remember. I remember some concern had been brought, something to the effect of like, hey, these concerns only come against African American males in these positions. That was shared.
And excuse me, but to be clear, that was shared by a board member or somebody else, a director or somebody else?
It was a board member.
Okay. Do you remember who?
I believe that was raised by Director Woodward.
Okay. And what's the race of Director Woodward, if you know?
She's African American.
Okay. So, and this is the same board that decided not to take any action against Posley, and they raised the issue of, was the complaint motivated by race? Is that
Objection,
accurate?
form, compound.
Join.
They definitely, with the question that was raised there, or the comment that was made by that board member, yeah, she definitely shared that, hey, this only seems to be a concern that comes up about these individuals, African American males.
African American males, okay. What, if any, was the response to that statement?
Oh man, I don't recall.
Did Dr. Baez state anything at that meeting?
No, I don't recall either.
Okay. Okay. So, based on the comments or questions of the board, did you get a sense of why they were or were not taking an action against Dr. Holliday or Dr. Posley at that time?
Objection, calls for speculation.
Join.
I was confused about what, if any, direction that was going to go on afterwards, because the conversation left me with an ambiguous, or I didn't know what, if anything, was going to take place.
Okay. Is that because they didn't? Was there any board resolution that happened as a result of that?
Mm-hmm.
Was there a consensus that happened as a result of that meeting?
No, I don't remember a consensus.
Okay. So, is it fair to say that the only act that took place at that meeting was no act,
Objective form, mistakes, prior testimony.
taken by the board?
Yeah, that's my recollection.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And it's also fair to say then that after Director Woodward's raised these issues of race being a factor in the complaints against black males, that they also took no action, correct?
Objective form calls for the lack of speculation, or sorry, lack of foundation calls for speculation.
I'll join that objection.
The inaction was subsequent to those comments.
Perfect. Thank you.